Building on part 1, in this video, Jeff Nippard and I will show you how to approach your nutrition in order to build your first 5 kilograms of muscle. You will learn why nutrition matters for muscle growth, how to set up your calorie and protein intake, what foods to focus on, and how to time your nutrients throughout the day. These recommendations cover both men and women. Let's go! The main thing you need to understand about nutrition for muscle growth is that eating does not cause muscle growth, it permits muscle growth. Remember from the previous video that high tension training is what stimulates the production of new muscle tissue. But the availability of nutrients determines how much new muscle can be built. If there aren't enough amino acids and excess energy available, muscle growth will be limited or may not occur at all, even if your training provides a great stimulus for growth. This makes sense, right? You can't just make muscle out of thin air. New muscle is constructed out of amino acids, so you need to eat protein to supply them. It also takes energy to build muscle, so you need to make sure you're eating enough calories as well. On the other hand, without the training stimulus, all the protein and calories in the world won't get you much new muscle. This is why we say that nutrition has a permissive role in muscle building. It doesn't initiate muscle growth, but it does influence how much muscle growth can occur. Now, there are exceptions to this. For example, undernourished people can gain muscle simply by eating more food, at least until they regain their normal amount of lean mass. Also, some individuals, usually those that are naturally lean, can temporarily gain some muscle mass along with fat when they gain weight, even if they don't do high tension training. But in your case, you should think of nutrition as providing the building blocks and energy necessary for constructing new muscle tissue. The key lesson here is that you can't force feed muscle growth. If you fail to initiate a growth stimulus in the gym, you can't compensate in the kitchen. Similarly, you can't boost the effect of a good workout by overeating in the post-workout period. Eating far beyond what's needed to permit muscle growth won't actually help you gain much more muscle. It will mostly result in increased fat gain, and I assume fat gain is something you want to minimize.
So, with this in mind, how should you approach your diet? Well, to permit muscle growth, you need to eat enough protein and enough calories from a mixture of carbs and fat. When it comes to protein, how much you should eat per day is the most important factor. Just take a look at this graphic. As you can see, you hit the maximum rate of muscle growth at a protein intake of 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. This green zone is where you want to be. Now, some brofessors will insist that that's too low, and you really need at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and if you're really serious, maybe be closer to 1.5. It also wouldn't hurt to always have a protein shake handy to feed your starving muscles. But these brofessors are mistaken. Protein intakes above 1 gram per pound don't seem to add any additional hypertrophic benefit. Again, you can't force feed muscle growth. Now, to be fair, higher protein intakes can have some application in advanced trainees, especially if you're cutting to a low body fat. But for the most part, intakes above 1 gram per pound just aren't necessary for building muscle. Also, try to avoid the common mistake of thinking about muscle growth as an on-off switch. A lot of people think that you either eat enough protein to build muscle at the maximum rate, or you don't build any muscle at all. But this isn't how it works. Any intake above what's needed for basic health, so just 60 to 70 grams per day, will provide enough amino acids for some muscle growth as long as your training is on point. So if you can't financially afford to eat a high protein diet, or you don't like to eat high protein for whatever reason, this doesn't mean you can't still build muscle. You can, it'll just be at a somewhat slower rate, and you may not maximize on your full potential. For example, if a high protein diet would allow you to gain 15 pounds of muscle in your first year, a low protein diet might still allow you to gain 10, 8, or 5 pounds of muscle, depending on just how low your protein intake is. Okay, so that's the broad strokes for protein. Now, the amount of calories you should eat depends on your starting point and your primary goal. But before I get to that, I think it'd be helpful to clarify how we should think about food in terms of macronutrients and calories.
If you're like most people, you choose the foods you eat based on how good they taste or how full they make you feel. You don't choose them based on macronutrients and calories. And while this is a psychologically healthy mindset, in order to achieve fitness goals, you need to develop at least a general sense of how much protein, carbs, fat, and calories are in the foods you're eating on a regular basis. This is a skill you'll learn over time, until eventually you can get to a point where you're like Neo inside the Matrix. When you look at a food, you see the numbers inside of it. That said, it's important not to become too obsessed with this. Some people get to the point where they won't eat anything unless they know the exact nutritional information beforehand. This isn't good either. The goal is to develop a strong familiarity with the macronutrient profile of the foods you're eating on a regular basis, not to become obsessed with hitting your macros to the gram. So, here are some of the basics you need to know. A kilocalorie is a measurement unit for energy, and it is equal to the amount it takes to heat up 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. When we say that a food has a certain amount of calories, we refer to how much heat is released when that food is burned in a device called bomb calorimeter. Food is burned in your body as well, so the calorie value of a food is a pretty accurate estimate of how much energy your body is able to derive from it. Your body oxidizes food to get the energy it needs to exercise, to do daily activities, and perform internal functions, like keeping your heart beating, maintaining body temperature, or growing new tissues, like your fingernails or hair. If you eat more calories than you burn, that means you're in a caloric surplus, and you will gain weight over time. And if you eat less calories than you burn, that means you're in a caloric deficit, and you lose weight over time. This is how you can control your body weight. Calories come from 3 macronutrients that form the basis of all foods: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Technically, alcohol, fiber, and water also count as macronutrients, but we'll ignore those for now. 1 gram of protein provides 4 calories, 1 gram of carbohydrate also has 4 calories, and 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. For what it's worth, a gram of fiber has about 2 calories, a gram of alcohol has 7 calories, and water has no calories. In most parts of the world, the nutritional value of food is listed for 100 grams of product. For example, 100 grams of commercially prepared bread may contain 11 grams of protein, 45 grams of carbs, 3 grams of fat, and 4 grams of fiber. The calorie content would therefore be around 260 calories. 11 grams of protein times 4 calories, plus 45 grams of carbs times 4 calories, plus 3 grams of fat times 9 calories, plus 4 grams of fiber times 2 calories.
Now, if you've paid any attention to food labels over the years, you've probably noticed that the caloric content of different foods varies a lot, even if those foods are the exact same weight. For example, 100 grams of lettuce only has 15 calories, while 100 grams of peanut butter has 590 calories. The same is true for food volume. 1 cup of fresh strawberries has 50 calories, while 1 cup of strawberry gushers has 640 calories. In this case, we'd consider the fresh strawberries to be a so-called high-volume food because you would need to eat 8 times the volume of fresh strawberries to match the same calories worth of gushers. Because of this variation in caloric density, it should be clear that even though weight loss and weight gain ultimately comes down to calories in versus calories out, certain foods are clearly better suited for some fitness goals than others. Low-calorie, high-volume foods are great for fat loss because they make you feel much fuller, while high-calorie, low-volume foods are better suited for gaining weight, especially for people that have naturally low appetites. I'll detail exactly which foods are better for your goals a little later in the video with some detailed, specific examples, but for now, the key takeaway is that there's a difference between food quantity and calorie content. It's possible to eat tiny amounts of food and still have a high caloric intake, and it's possible to eat a large amount of food and still have a low caloric intake. It all depends on the foods you choose. Okay, next let's see exactly how many calories you should be eating to build muscle effectively. My go-to rule for lean muscle growth is to eat around 10 to 20% more calories than you'd need to maintain your weight. In other words, you take your maintenance calories and add 10 to 20%. As a rule of thumb, multiplying your body weight in pounds by 14 to 16 will get you in the right ballpark for your maintenance calories. If you're more active, you'll want to be closer to 16 or maybe a bit higher. If you're less active, you'll want to be closer to 14 or maybe a bit lower, especially if you're overweight. So let's say you weigh 175 pounds or about 80 kilos and you're regularly active. Your maintenance calories should be around 2,400 to 2,800 calories per day. Adding 10% to that would give you a ballpark range of 2,700 to 3,000 calories per day for your lean gaining plan. For a more individualized recommendation, you can use a guess and check method, which I'll explain up here on the screen, which you can pause if you want to read for more detail. Even more accurately, you can use an app like MacroFactor, which very accurately determines your individual energy expenditure through finely tuned science-based algorithms. Now, full disclosure, I'm a part of the MacroFactor team, and I even had a hand in some of the app's development, but I do think it's by far the best option on the market. Regardless of what method you use, the key point is that most people really only need a few hundred calories above their maintenance for muscle growth. Going higher than this will result in more weight gain, but the higher you go, the more fat you'll gain as opposed to muscle. Once you've determined your calories, you should set up your macros by setting your protein at 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, as we already discussed. Set your fat intake at around 20 to 30% of calories, and then simply fill in any remaining calories with carbs. The specific carb and fat numbers aren't nearly as important as hitting your daily calorie and protein target, so I mainly encourage people to focus on calories and protein, and you can let your carb and fat intake be more flexible according to your own personal preference.
Now, if you don't want to bother with the calculations, I've put a link to the ShredSmart calculator in the description. Click on it and it will take you to this page. In the weight section, input your current body weight and select pounds or kilograms. Then choose your activity level based on these guidelines. In the goal section, select lean bulk. And in the macro options section, select your preferred protein and fat intake. I personally recommend 0.8 grams of protein per pound, 30% fat, rest carbs. But like Jeff pointed out, your carb and fat intake can fluctuate between days as long as you hit your daily protein and calorie targets. After you do all this, the calculator will estimate your daily target calories and macros. However, this basic guideline of eating 10 to 20% above maintenance isn't ideal for everyone. In fact, for some it can be counterproductive. For example, if you're a naturally lean individual that struggles with gaining weight, the so-called hard gainer body type, setting your calorie intake at 10 to 20% above maintenance may not be enough to permit muscle growth. You may need to eat more. Alternatively, if you currently have a good amount of belly fat, you may not wish to gain more weight and would rather build muscle and lose fat while staying at the same body weight. Or if you're currently at a high level of body fat, your primary goal may be to lose weight while building some muscle, in which case a slight caloric deficit would be the best choice for you. To account for these individual cases, it's best to set your calorie intake based on your starting point and your primary goal. So in the next sections, Jeff and I will tell you how you should approach muscle building from 3 possible starting points: lean, skinny fat, and overweight. If all your life you've been lean and your goal is to gain weight and muscle, you should eat as many calories as needed to gain roughly 2 or 3 pounds per month, or 1 to 1.5 kilograms per month. This rate of weight gain may require eating much more than a 10% calorie surplus because naturally lean individuals are often resistant to weight gain. To show you just how resistant, I'll briefly describe the results of a 1999 study by Levine and colleagues. These researchers took 16 young adults and overfed them by 1000 calories above maintenance every day for 8 weeks, so just about 2 months. Remember that the 10% calorie surplus we recommended in the previous section would only be a few hundred calories above maintenance. These subjects were eating 1000 calories above maintenance. But despite the massive surplus, some subjects hardly gained any weight. As you can see, the person who gained the least weight only gained 1.4 kilograms, or just about 3 pounds, while the person who gained the most weight gained 7.2 kilograms, or just about 16 pounds in the same time frame. The most weight gain resistant individual stored only around 60 calories a day as body fat, while the least resistant individual stored more than 10 times as much, about 690 kilocalories a day. The main reason for this disparity is that upon being fed a calorie surplus, some people started to feel more energetic and dissipated most of that calorie surplus through unconscious movements. Unconscious movements include things such as fidgeting, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, spending more time standing up, or having better posture while sitting. One person burned as much as 700 calories a day in this manner. In stark contrast, other participants responded to the calorie surplus by becoming more lethargic, as evidenced by one person actually decreasing his daily energy expenditure by about 100 calories. This is that unlucky guy that gets fat just thinking about food. What this study shows is that we cannot know exactly how many calories a person will need to eat to gain 1 to 1.5 kilograms a month. Some lean individuals may need a daily calorie surplus of 500 calories or more to gain weight at the ideal rate. For this reason, it's best to set your calorie intake based on your weekly rate of weight gain rather than based on formulas and calculators. Your main target should be to eat as much as necessary to gain roughly 2 or 3 pounds or 1 to 1.5 kilograms per month. But a common problem for many lean beginners is that they physically struggle to eat the volume of food they require to gain size. Luckily, there is an easy fix to this. Simply choose lower volume foods that are less filling and higher calorie. This is the opposite of what you do for fat loss. Here's a full list of strategies that you can use. Add 1 or 2 extra daily meals. For example, go from 3 meals per day to 4 or 5 meals per day. Add snacks between meals. Ideally, you should choose healthy, high-protein options. Some ideas include peanuts, almonds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, dried fruit, cereal bars, protein bars, fruit bars, bagels, biscuits, and trail mix. Add more oil to your meals or when cooking your meals. However, something worth mentioning here is that although increasing fat intake is the easiest way to add calories to your diet, limiting fat intake to a maximum of 30-35% of your daily calories and creating most of the calorie surplus through carbohydrates may result in less body fat gain because dietary fat is stored more easily than carbs. Replace lean protein sources with fattier options. So you can replace lean meats, low-fat cheeses with fattier meats, full-fat cheeses, nuts, seeds, peanut butter, full-fat tofu, hummus, mock meats, and so on. Also, if you want to contribute to reducing animal suffering, you can limit or completely avoid animal products. After all, can our fitness goals be more important than the suffering and lives of other animals? This is a question that gets ignored in the fitness world because we instinctively believe that if the majority of people do something, like consume lots of animal protein, the choice must be acceptable. And so any moral issues are diffused by the peace of mind that comes with sharing the burden of responsibility and knowing that we're not going to incur social reproach. But if reducing suffering is one of your values, what you can do is replace lean meats with high-fat plant-based mock meats or with full-fat tofu, hummus, nuts, and seeds. Replace solid protein with liquid protein. So you can replace meat, eggs, tofu, or mock meats with protein shakes, milk, soy milk, or other high-protein drinks. Add liquid calories to your diet. Some ideas include fruit juice, sports drinks, sweetened coffee or tea, or flavored oat milk. Don't overdo fiber. In addition to veggies, legumes, and whole grains, also consume cereal, bread, pasta, white rice, and tortillas. Leave snacks or foods out in the open around the house in order to tempt you to get a serving. One simple idea is to leave a bowl of trail mix or a box of protein bars on the desk where you normally sit to use your computer.
Now, even though gaining weight can be harder, genetically leaner individuals are still lucky because they usually gain more muscle and less fat as they gain weight. One study found that naturally lean people gained 60 to 70% of their weight as lean mass during a period of overfeeding, whereas the percentages flipped for people with naturally higher body fat. They stored 60 to 70% of their weight gained as fat mass and only 30 to 40% as lean mass. So if you're starting out naturally lean, you can expect that for every 2 to 3 pounds of weight you gain, at least half of it should be muscle. This is very good. There are a few exceptions though. Some naturally lean individuals have a body frame with narrow shoulders and narrow rib cage, wider hips, and more belly fat with love handles. In my coaching experience, I found that these individuals often do have a harder time building muscle without gaining fat. And in this case, I'd suggest lowering your target rate of weight gain to 1 to 2 pounds per month rather than 2 to 3 pounds per month, just to make sure that more of the weight you're gaining is in fact muscle. The second starting point is the so-called skinny fat body type, characterized by both low muscle mass and high body fat. This starting point can be a bit trickier because these individuals often don't want to gain weight, as it'll result in more fat gain, but they also don't want to lose weight because it'll make them look more skinny. If you fall into this category, I'd simply focus on body recomposition for your first 6 months or so. This means your goal will be to build muscle and lose fat at the same time while maintaining your body weight. When you first start lifting weights, you can see impressive body recomposition because the calories from your excess body fat can provide the energy to fuel muscle building. You don't really need a caloric surplus because the surplus is already on your body, so to speak. So even if your body weight stays more or less the same, you'll still notice your muscles getting bigger and your belly getting smaller as long as you're making solid progress in the gym. Keep in mind, muscle growth can be a bit slower if you go the recomp route, but most people do find that it's worth it because they can take care of their muscle building goals and their fat loss goals at the same time. And for recomp, all you really need to do is 3 simple things. Eat at around maintenance calories, so again, the number of calories you need to maintain your weight, eat enough protein, and train hard and smart in the gym. If you've been maintaining the same body weight for a while, you can even see impressive body recomposition by eating more or less the same as you've been eating, adding a daily protein shake, and focusing all your attention on training. And finally, if you're starting out overweight or obese, you can set up your diet to prioritize fat loss, but still allow for muscle gain as well. This is essentially another type of body recomposition where your body fat goes down as your muscle mass goes up, except instead of maintaining your body weight, you'll be losing weight. In this case, I'd recommend setting your caloric intake at 10 to 20% below maintenance, ensuring a protein intake of around 1 gram of protein per centimeter in height, and focusing on progressing in the gym. In general, you want to be somewhere in the range of losing around 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week. Slower weight loss is usually better when simultaneous muscle growth is a goal because the body is less likely to break down muscle tissue for fuel. And yes, even though you'll be in a caloric deficit, you can still build muscle because once again, your body can tap into existing fat stores to fuel muscle building. The most reliable way to ensure that you're hitting the desired caloric deficit is to measure your food and use a diet app like MacroFactor to track your calories and macros.
And if you don't know how to track your calories and macros with a nutrition app, here's a quick tutorial. The first step is to decide how many daily meals you're going to have and how you're going to distribute your calories and protein throughout the day. I call this the diet structure. For example, if you want to eat 3 meals per day, you might decide to have 30% of your calories in the first meal, 30% in the second meal, and 40% in your last meal. Or you might do 20%, 50%, 30%, or 20, 40, 40, or 25, 25, 50. If you want to eat 4 meals per day, you might have 20% of your calories in the first and second meals and 30% in your third and fourth meals. Or you might do 15, 25, 35, 25, or 15, 25, 30, 30. When your primary goal is fat loss, the number of daily meals and the calorie distribution should come down entirely to what is most enjoyable and convenient to you. But since in the beginning you probably don't know what diet structure will best fit your preferences and lifestyle, I suggest you start with an arbitrary option like 3 meals per day and adjust it later on if needed. For this quick tutorial, I'll use my current fat loss diet structure as an example, which consists of 3 daily meals where the calories are distributed like this. Around 20% in the first meal, which is just a protein smoothie, and about 40% in the second and third meals. Once you've decided on a diet structure, the next step is to calculate how many calories and grams of protein you should have in each meal. You take your daily target calories and protein targets and divide them based on the percentages you've chosen. In this example, you may have around 400 calories and 40 grams of protein in the first meal and around 950 calories and 50 to 60 grams of protein in the second and third meals. The third step is to add your daily target calories and macros to the nutrition app, which in this case is 2300 calories and 150 grams of protein. And now you're ready to start tracking. As a beginner, the best strategy is to log your food before preparing or ordering a meal. That's because you need the app to tell you how much of each ingredient you need to use in order to hit that meal's protein and calorie targets, or to confirm that the meal you're about to order from a restaurant fits within your calorie budget or that it is high enough in protein. If you log your food after you've already consumed it, you'll often find that you fell short on your protein targets or that you've overshot your calories. So here's how you might track your meals. In this example, for the first meal of the day, you want a protein smoothie that gives you around 40 grams of protein and around 400 calories. But you don't know how much of each ingredient to use. Well, what you do is you go into the app and test different quantities of protein powder, fruit and other ingredients until you get the target calories and protein. Through trial and error, you discover that one option can be 30 grams of pea protein isolate, 20 grams of brown rice protein, a large banana, which is about 140 grams, and 15 grams of walnuts. So now that you know the quantities, you can use a food scale to weigh each ingredient and make the protein smoothie. For your next meal, let's say you want a burrito bowl that gives you around 950 calories and 50 to 60 grams of protein. You go into the app and test different ingredients and different quantities until you discover a combination that fits this meal's calorie and protein targets. It turns out that one option is 150 grams of smoked tofu, 230 grams of chickpeas, which is a small can drained and rinsed, 70 grams of medium-fat hummus, 200 grams of boiled green beans, 10 grams of roasted sunflower seeds, and 5 grams of flax seeds. Now that you know what quantities to use, you can weigh everything with a scale and prepare your burrito bowl. I think you get the idea, but I'll give you an example for the final meal as well. For the third meal of the day, let's say you want to eat lentil pasta and get around 950 calories and 50 to 60 grams of protein. Once again, you use the app to find out how much of each ingredient you need to use. One option turns out to be 150 grams of red lentil pasta, weighed dry before cooking, 5 grams of oil, 100 grams of plant-based minced meat, once again weighed before cooking, and a jar of low-fat pasta sauce. Once again, you weigh everything with a scale and prepare your meal. At the end of the day, you can see that with these 3 meals, you've hit your calorie and protein targets very well. We went a bit over the protein targets, but that's okay. You don't have to hit every macro target perfectly. And that's how you track your calories and protein with a nutrition app. You log the food before you consume it so that you know what quantities to use, or whether the foods you plan to eat can give you enough protein without overshooting the calorie limit. As you get more skilled and the Neo inside of you starts to awaken, you will eventually only need to log your final meal in advance to discover what quantities to use, and you will be able to log your other meals after you already consumed them, because you will have a good sense of what you eat and you won't stray from the calorie and protein targets too much. Tracking your food intake with a food scale and an app is the most reliable way to create a calorie deficit. However, if you don't want to track your food, there's another method that you can use to create a calorie deficit that is less reliable, but it is much less stressful psychologically. That is setting up diet rules that create a calorie deficit indirectly. Here's what you can do. Limit fatty foods. Oil, fried foods, chips, fatty meats, full-fat dairy, nuts, seeds, peanut butter, chocolate, and most desserts. Limit sweet foods and drinks. Table sugar, most desserts and snacks, soda, fruit juice, sports drinks, energy drinks, sweetened coffee and tea. Limit or eliminate alcoholic drinks. Increase lean protein intake. Lean meats, cottage cheese, low-fat tofu, seitan, low-fat mock meats. But remember, if you want to contribute to reducing animal suffering, it's best to limit or completely avoid animal products. Increase intake of high-fiber protein sources. Some examples include beans, chickpeas, lentils, or mushrooms. Increase veggie intake. Eat high-protein foods and veggies at most meals. Drink more water. Skip one of your daily meals. For example, replace breakfast with water and black coffee. Establish a regular meal schedule. That is, try to eat around the same times every day. Save most of your calories for the time of day when you're most hungry. If that's in the evening, eat small meals throughout the day and save calories for a larger dinner. Avoid snacking and picking throughout the day and focus on eating discrete meals instead. Avoid bringing high-calorie foods into your home, car, or workspace. Half the battle is won at the supermarket. Don't leave food or snacks where you can easily see them, especially where you can easily grab a serving. And finally, eat most of your meals at home. When you prepare your meals at home, you have control over each ingredient, especially oil, and can create lower calorie meals. If you follow most of the diet rules I've listed here, you'll likely manage to create a 10 to 20% calorie deficit for at least the first few weeks, and if you're lucky, maybe even for a few months. But the best approach is to use tracking and diet rules together. Logging your food intake will help you stay on track, and the non-tracking based behavioral strategies will make dieting easier, increasing your likelihood of success.
It should be clear by now that the 3 pillars of muscle growth are eating enough protein, eating enough calories, and progressing in the gym. If you just get these 3 things right, you'll have no problem building your first 10 pounds of muscle. In fact, most people could keep their diet more or less the same, focus all their attention on training, and still gain their first 10 pounds of muscle because the average Western diet is already high enough in calories and protein to permit muscle growth at the beginner level. Still, if you want to maximize your results, as many new lifters do, you can pay attention to some of the finer details like food sources and nutrient timing. Let's start with food sources. A common mistake a lot of beginners make is having a very restrictive diet. I still see a lot of new lifters picking up an old school bodybuilding menu of chicken, rice, and broccoli every meal, every day. Of course, restrictive so-called bro diets can work as long as macronutrient needs are met, but the problem is that their lack of food variety can make them harder to stick to, and they can lead to vitamin and mineral deficiencies if the food list is really restrictive. This can then negatively impact health and training performance. So it's a lot smarter to get a wide variety of different foods in your diet. One easy way to do this is to pick 5 or 6 protein sources, starchy carbs, veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, sauces, and fats, and then combine them in different ways over the course of the week. Remember, having some flexibility is good, moderation is good, and no foods need to be strictly off limits. Now, when it comes to nutrient timing, there are 3 things you can pay attention to if you really want to cross your T's and dot your I's. These are protein meal distribution, peri-workout nutrition and protein intake before bed. The best data suggests that it's best to spread your daily food intake across 3 to 5 meals, with each meal containing at least around 30 grams of protein. It does seem that having at least 3 solid hits of protein per day is a bit better than having only 1 or 2 high-protein meals. But again, total daily protein intake is the most important factor. You can also pay attention to how you time your nutrients around the workout, something we call peri-workout nutrition. I think this area is largely overhyped by gym bros, but there are still some advantages to consuming a well-balanced pre-workout meal to fuel training and a reasonably timed post-workout meal, ideally coming within 4 to 6 hours after the pre-workout meal.
Some people call this 4 to 6 hour period the anabolic window, because meals consumed in this time frame ensure amino acids are circulating in the bloodstream when muscle protein synthesis rapidly goes up in the first few hours post-workout. But like Jeff said, this tends to be given much more attention than it actually deserves. Not too long ago, most lifters believed the anabolic window was very short. So short that they had to rush to drink their fast-absorbing protein shakes in the locker room to prevent the workout from going to waste. We now know this isn't necessary. When you consume a high-protein diet, you have elevated levels of amino acids circulating in your bloodstream pretty much at all times. This study found that just 26 grams of protein from lean beef eaten alone sustained the release of amino acids into the bloodstream for 6 hours, which was the entire study period. Given that fiber, starch, and fat slow protein digestion, your average meal likely sustains elevated levels for much longer than that. So even if you worked out fasted in the morning and did not eat protein for several hours afterwards, you'd still have enough amino acids in your bloodstream from the meals of the day before to permit less than ideal muscle growth and repair. Secondly, muscle protein synthesis remains elevated above baseline for at least 24 to 36 hours after weight training. This means that as long as you hit your daily protein targets, you will get most of your results regardless of how you time your nutrients. Still, if you really want to optimize muscle growth, it's best to sandwich your workouts between 2 protein-containing meals to take advantage of that peak anabolic window as well. In addition to containing protein, your pre-workout meal should also be relatively high in carbs, as having glucose in the bloodstream during training can help boost performance a bit. Notice I said a bit. Most of the glucose used to fuel training comes from muscle glycogen stores, not the bloodstream, and muscle glycogen levels are determined by your total carb intake. A workout session may only reduce muscle glycogen stores by 25 to 40%, depending on how much volume you do. If you don't train that muscle group again for at least a day and you consume carbs in the meantime, that muscle group's glycogen levels will be mostly or fully replenished by the time you do the next workout. This is why you can lift heavy weights and make progress in the gym even if you train on an empty stomach. That being said, since glucose from the bloodstream is also used to fuel muscular contractions, eating carbohydrates prior to working out can improve training performance. To give myself as an example, for my first 1 or 2 years of lifting, I trained mostly on an empty stomach around 1 p.m. after a long morning fast. And it was great. I could build muscle and strength just fine. But I later found that if I trained in the afternoon or evening, after having at least 1 carb-rich pre-workout meal, I felt a bit stronger, and I could maybe perform 1 more rep with a given weight compared to when I trained after not having eaten for 12 to 16 hours. So if you want to take advantage of this potential boost in performance, you can time your pre-workout meal 1 to 2 hours prior to training and aim for it to contain around 1 gram of carbs per kilogram of body weight. It's probably a good idea to avoid making your pre-workout meal larger than this, as it can make you too full to train without discomfort. Lastly, there may be a benefit to consuming protein before bed or to setting your last meal in a way that prolongs protein digestion so you get a sustained release of amino acids throughout the night. There are 4 ways you can do this. 1. You can make your last meal very large, as the more food you eat, the more time it will take to digest and absorb. 2. Have more fat in your last meal, as fat slows down protein digestion. 3. You can choose slower digesting protein sources. Examples include high-protein plant foods like wheat, pea, or soy-based mock meats, legumes, nuts or seeds, milk protein, eggs. And number 4, you can include more fiber in your last meal because fiber also slows down protein digestion. High-fiber foods include legumes, whole grains, veggies, and mushrooms. Alternatively, you can have a protein shake before bed, as this will also result in a sustained release of amino acids into the bloodstream for the first few hours of the night. But remember, protein meal distribution, peri-workout nutrition, and protein before bed matter little in the big picture, especially as a new lifter. So if you want, you cannot worry about this stuff at all. For most beginners, a good nutrition plan for muscle growth can be reduced to just 3 simple things. Eat enough to slowly gain weight, drink a protein shake per day, and make progress in the gym. That's it. Alright, you've reached the end of this 2-part series. Thanks for watching. And now, if you need more help to put everything you've learned here into practice, there are 2 programs that can help you do that. First, there's Jeff's Fundamentals Hypertrophy Program. Even though this video focused on nutrition, muscle growth ultimately starts with training. Without a good training stimulus, no nutrition strategy will get you muscular. The Fundamentals program comes with 3 separate routines that you can run for 8 weeks each in order to put on muscle mass in your first year of training. I've put an affiliate link for it in the description. And if your main goal is to improve how your physique looks as quickly as possible and not necessarily to put on size, I recommend enrolling into my ShredSmart program. ShredSmart is perfect for you if you're starting out skinny fat or overweight, as it shows you how to set up your diet and training to build muscle while reducing your belly fat, and if you run it long enough, even get 6-pack abs. I've also linked it in the description. Thanks for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, and I'll see you in the next one.